Today I'm going to show you how to make a quilted book cover, and it's a really good project if you're just starting out with sewing, very beginner friendly, but if you're a bit more advanced at sewing then it would also just take you no time to whip up a little book cover. I have a few friends that are really into reading and I thought this would be a really nice gift idea for them. I've also made a pattern that you can follow along if you would like to. I will leave it linked down below in the description bar. And in classic Rosie form, the pattern doesn't include one size, it includes 5 different sizes. So I'm going to show you the different sizes. This is quite heavy because it's full of books. So here we are, we have 5 different sized book covers. This is the smallest size in the pattern, it fits most paperback books. And on the inside there is a little pocket where you can put pens or rulers or little notes. You could even leave it as one big pocket and slot some paper in. The description will have all of the different sizes of books that you can fit in the different pouches, and I've left room for really thick books, so if you want a really chunky book in here it will still fit. They're all the same method of construction, they just have different sizes obviously. I love the little embroidery and how that turned out on this one. And then for example this is the 3rd size, and this one I have my little notebook in, and I put pens and a ruler so that when I'm making notes I've actually got a little sketchbook and a notebook in here. So that's another nice idea, again really good gift idea if you find a nice notebook for someone and you don't want to just gift a notebook and you think, oh, I could maybe make a cover for them, and then you can keep this in your bag and you know exactly where it is. You could even use these as little clutch bags. You could add a little strap or just carry it like this. Yeah, very sweet little bags. And then there's 2 larger sizes. The first size is good for cookbooks. This one's got a cookbook in it at the moment. Let me show you. This is the size cookbook that's in this cover. Just a very standard hardback size cookbook. And then the largest size, I've got a few books in here at the moment, just to show you. For example, a little kids book fits in it perfectly with some room, so you could put a few kids books in it, just to keep them in your little baby's room. This is one of my favourite books. I bought this as an adult, bought a kids book, but being a poodle mother I couldn't resist it. And the drawings are just so beautiful. And then I've just got 2 other big oddly sized books in there as well. The largest size, and in fact probably the size below, fit my laptop in it, so you could also make a laptop cover. I love the simplicity of this pattern. It's a very satisfying project, putting a book in at the end and it fits perfectly in this. Ooh. This is one I've made for my friend in the smallest size, and then this one is in a new fabric that I picked up the other day, which I am in love with. If any of you watched my where to find nice fabrics video, you'll be proud to know that I finally cut into one of my Liberty fabrics and I made a gorgeous book cover in that. So I'm going to get on and show you how I make these little quilted book covers. So if you're printing at home on A4 or US letter paper, this is the best way to print it out. I'd open up the document in Adobe Acrobat, which is a free application. Start by printing the first page, check that the size is right. You want custom scale at 100% and the orientation to auto. Print the first page out, check it's the right size at the top, and then go ahead and print the rest out. If you just want a specific size printed out, then I have listed which pages you should print. Once you've printed the pages that you want, you're going to have to trim down some of the edges to match up the registration marks. I then glue the pages together with a glue stick, and then I go in with some clear sellotape just to hold them all together. As always, there's an A0 copy shop file included if you'd rather go and print it on a larger scale. So now we've got the pattern pieces ready, we can go ahead and start cutting out our fabric. You'll need an outer lining and wadding fabric. I've chosen these 2 fabrics for my outer and lining. You can use your outer fabric as your lining, but this one was quite a special fabric, so I wanted to save the inside with a slightly cheaper fabric. We're going to start by cutting the outer and wadding fabric around 2 to 3 centimetres larger than the paper pattern. This is going to allow for shrinkage. So we're cutting out the main body piece and the top cover. You can cut them as separate pieces or just do them in one big rectangle like I'm doing. While I was here, I went and cut out the rest of the pattern pieces. I've also labelled on the pattern piece the size that the pattern piece is if you'd rather just cut out using a rotary cutter.
I just wanna go out on a walk with you. Baby, you know
I'm using a fusible wadding, so one side fuses to the back of my outer fabric. So I take it over to my iron, I give my outer fabric a good press so there's no creases, and then I place it on top of the fusible wadding and I fuse those two together. If you're not using fusible wadding, then you'll need to pin the fabric before you start quilting it.
I just wanna see your shadow.
I'm just quilting vertical lines this time, so I start out by drawing a guideline at the side that I can follow, and I have this special sewing machine foot that shows me where 3 centimeters is or 2 centimeters is away from my foot. So I just use my sewing machine foot to follow that guide, and then I just continue using that until I've quilted the entire piece. You can choose whatever quilt design you like. I quite like doing diagonal checks as well. That also looks really nice. Once you've finished stitching your quilted design, give your fabric a good press, and then we can put the paper pattern piece back on top and cut those out. Make sure to take note of any notches, and we're also going to trace off the tie placement on the main body pattern piece. To do that, I just place a pin through the cross, lift the paper pattern up, and add a little bit of pencil just to mark where that is. I also added a pin this time because it was quite hard to see where I'd put that pencil mark. Moving on, we're going to create the pocket for the top cover. This is an optional step, but I think it's quite nice to have a little option of adding a pen in the top cover. So you want to start by folding one of the long edges over by 1 centimeter and giving it a good press, and then fold again by another 1 centimeter and press that flat. We can then just take that over to the sewing machine and edge stitch along that folded line. Give the pocket a little press, and then you can line it up with the edge of your top cover lining piece. Pin it into place, and we're going to stitch around the outside of that pocket with a 0.5 centimeter seam allowance.
Baby, you know I just like to talk with you. I just wanna go out on a walk.
You can just leave the pocket open as it is, but I've also included top stitch guidelines. If you want to add pens or a ruler to the pocket, then this creates the right size little compartments for that.
I just wanna go out on a walk with.
Once you finish stitching those compartments, I give the fabric another press, and then we can move on to making the ties. So to make the ties, we're going to fold the fabric in half, wrong sides facing, then open up the tie, and we're going to fold the long edges in to meet that center crease. So do that on both sides, and then fold the whole thing on top of itself. And then we're going to finish one end of each tie. So to do so, we're going to open up the tie so you can see both folded over edges. Then we're going to fold these over back on themselves in the other direction. And we're just going to stitch across the top with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. I then trim the seam allowance down to 0.5 centimeters and fold the seam allowance inside the tie. You might want to push out the corner, and then we can edge stitch along the open side and finish with a press. We only need to finish one end of each tie like this.
Same things you can see, understand the meaning on a new degree.
We're going to attach one tie to the top cover lining to start with. So you want to find that center notch, and we're going to place the raw end of the tie against the edge of the top cover lining piece. And we're just roughly stitching that on with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. But you want to make sure it's sitting straight at a nice 90-degree angle. Then we can stitch the other tie on to the quilted main body piece, and we want to have the tie facing down towards the bottom where the 2 notches are. And we're going to start by stitching the raw end down on top of where we noted the tie placement, and we're just going to stitch that across, leaving about 1 centimeter of the tie. This is me realising I should have chosen a better fabric for this tutorial because you can't really see what's going on. Once we've stitched across the tie a few times, I then fold the tie over so it's now covering the raw end of that tie. We're going to move the foot up about 1 centimeter, place it back down, and we're going to stitch across that tie, covering the raw end.
Could be
Now we can finish making the top cover, so we take the quilted piece and place it on top of the lining, making sure the tie is out the way and not getting caught in any of the seam. And we're going to stitch around the sides, leaving the top open.
I just wanna go out and walk with you. Baby, you know I just like to talk.
I then go ahead and clip the corners and turn the top cover through. I then have this little tool that I can use to poke out the seam and get a really nice sharp corner. So we can take that over to the ironing board, give it a good little press. And then we can close the open part of the top cover by just stitching along the top with a 0.5 centimeter seam allowance. I then went and added a little label to the main body piece of the cover. Now we're going to construct the main body of the cover, so we're going to fold the quilted piece in half and stitch both edges down, and we're also going to fold the lining in half and stitch along one edge, and we're going to half stitch the other edge, leaving a hole in the center of about 8 centimeters. And we're going to use this hole later to pull everything through it.
When you're next to me, I just want to see the same things you can see.
You don't need to turn the lining through, that can stay as it is, but we are going to turn the quilted main body piece the right way round and give it a press. We're going to turn that main body quilted piece over so we can see the back of the bag, and we're going to find those 2 notches at the top. We're going to place the cover right sides facing on top of the quilted main body piece, and we're going to line it up to those notches. Then go ahead and stitch the top cover onto the main body of the bag with a 0.5 centimeter seam allowance. Once the top cover is attached, we're going to roll the bottom of the main body and top cover up and place it inside the main body lining, right sides facing. We're then going to pin both main body pieces into place around the top of the bag, and when we get to those side seams, we're going to open up the seam so that we don't have quite as much bulk on those edges. Once that's pinned into place, we can go ahead and stitch all the way around with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. We're then going to clip the side seam allowance to be about 0.5 centimeters. This just reduces the bulk around that part of the seam. Now we're going to find that hole that we left in the lining, and we're going to pull everything through that and just manipulate all those corners out again. I take it over to the iron and give the main body lining piece a good press before I go ahead and edge stitch along the open end, just closing up that hole in the lining.
I like to see the shape you're in from time to time. I just want to see your shadow.
We can then place the main body lining into the bag, really push in all of those corners and make sure the top is lying nice and flat. I give that top a little press just to help keep everything flat, and then I take it over to my sewing machine and we're going to stitch starting at the end of the top cover, and we're going to go all the way around the front and stop at the other end of the top cover. And we're just doing this with a 0.5 centimeter seam allowance. I finish with a final press just to make everything look nice and crisp and neat. And there we have a finished quilted book cover. You can pop your book inside and any pens that you might want to have handy. And now that you've made one, why not go ahead and make all of these different sizes? Here's some examples of the quilted book covers I've made, and just gives you an idea of what they look like for size and scale. I'm very excited to take one of these quilted book covers out with me with my little sketchbook in and my pencils. It's always nice carrying a little me-made item with me wherever I go. Let me know what you guys think of the new pattern and if you're going to give it a go yourself. I hope you're all having a wonderful day, and I will see you in my next video.
Baby, you know I just just like to talk with you.